Welcome to the August edition of Joy on the Journey. Your co-hosts, Father Joe Boisel and Frank Youngworth, and we welcome you to the regular program of Holy Trinity Anglican Church here in Hudson, Ohio. I mention Hudson, Ohio because, as you know, Father Joe, we're seen all over the world thanks to the live streaming of Hudson Cable Television.
That's right.
So we have to make sure people know this is not Hudson, Wisconsin, Hudson, New York. Hudson, Ohio.
That's right. That's right.
How you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
You should be.
Good to see you.
You beat me at golf yesterday.
Oh.
But we won't talk about that.
We'll keep that our secret, I thought.
That's our secret, but you...
it's out now in the world.
It's out there in the world. Yeah. Listen, we are going to have a show today which involves, of course, your homily.
That's right.
Why don't you mention to the folks so they stay around and don't miss it, because it was a good one.
Yeah, well, this is a passage taken from St. Paul's letter to the church at Ephesus, Ephesians chapter 3. It's one of my favorite passages in all of the New Testament. It's chapter 3, verses 14 to 21, and it's about how Paul prays for the church. And he says specifically what he prays for and what one thing is most important for us to keep in mind. So I'll leave it at that.
And it was very well done, and anything to do with Paul, I always enjoy.
Yeah, the Apostle Paul was an amazing man.
I mean, next to Jesus himself, Paul's my guy.
I think so. I think he's a lot of people's guy.
Oh,
isn't he?
yeah. What a guy. What a man.
Yes.
How he turned everything around.
Yeah. Really used of God, wasn't he?
He really did, yeah. And also, you're not having to cook meals every day after spending about a week and a half or so having to take care of...
It was 11 days, not that I was counting or anything.
But of course, a wonderful trip. Abby, your wife, and your son Benjamin are back.
That's right, yes. They were in Gothenburg, Sweden. They actually stopped in Amsterdam, in Holland first, and spent a few days in Amsterdam, and then over to Sweden, to Gothenburg. Abby and Benjamin were part of a group, Benjamin's soccer team, the Ambassador Soccer Club, which is an international club organization, by the way, and he plays here in the Northeast Ohio manifestation of that club. So, and they traveled to Gothenburg for what is called the Gothia Cup. It is the Youth World Cup of soccer, and so they participated in that and competed and did quite well. As a matter of fact, they didn't win it, but only one team can win. They went well into the tournament, had some great competitive play, and in fact got to see kids from all over the world. There were, I think my wife will tell you more about the number of teams that were there and countries that were represented, but it was quite an amazing adventure for them.
Well, I'm going to probably have to go join your wife right now. She's probably waiting for me to show up. We're going to talk to Abby Boisel, Joe's wife, and the mother of 5 boys. I always count you as well.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, yeah.
Mother of 5 boys.
Yes.
And she's agreed to sit down and chat a little bit about that wonderful trip where she bonded so well with her son Benjamin. And I think, as we'll talk about, that's a very unique thing they were doing together, which they may never do again.
No, probably, yeah.
Quite like that.
Not quite like that, right.
I'm going to go find Abby, and we'll see at the end of the program.
Okay.
Well, here at Holy Trinity Church, one of the real hard-working individuals that everybody has gotten to love so much over the past couple of years is our pastor's wife. And you talk about glue holding the whole thing together. This is the glue. Her name is Abby Boisel. And Abby, I'm glad you took time out so we can chat a little bit about this wonderful trip that you and your son Benjamin took. Benjamin being your number 3 son. And I'll let you tell it. You went to Sweden. You were gone for about 11 days. Tell us a little bit about, to build it up, to what it was and where you went, and then we'll kind of delve into it a little bit.
Well, it's a Youth World Soccer Cup in Gothenburg, Sweden. It's called the Gothia Cup. And probably even before we went on the trip, the work we did to go to it, the fundraising that we did, is probably as big a part of the story as anything. Spent lots of time working together, working separately, both of us, to raise the funds to be able to go, because it was quite expensive for the 2 of us to go. So that was probably an important part of just investing our time together and working for a goal, and then getting it, getting the money and getting to go, and amazing.
Benny worked hard
to
earn the money.
Yes.
Because we were fortunate enough to have him do some work over at our house, and I'm sure we were one of several. And I have to report to the folks out there and to all of Ben's friends, he did a good job. He did a real good job, and he was there and on time. And if there was a little bit you had to give him his way of instructions, he listened to him and he did it. So,
yeah,
and that was a good experience for him to have to do that. It wasn't something just handed to him. He had to work for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a long trip there. We started off in Amsterdam for 3 days, and they had friendly matches there where we just played. They sort of got acclimated to the time change, and we did some sightseeing. So it was a lot of fun, and they had 2 matches, and then we flew to Gothenburg, Sweden, where we spent a week. And even on the plane ride, heading to Gothenburg, there were teams. We had a French team on the plane with us. And we landed, and in the airport, there were teams all over. And then going into town, it was amazing. There were 80 countries represented, which was a record for the Gothia Cup. I'm not sure what the previous record was, how close it was, but 80 countries represented, over 1,600 teams.
Wow.
Ranging in age, I believe it was 13 to 18. So lots of kids from all over the country. They really did an excellent job of organizing the tournament, and we had great play and a lot of fun.
What kind of housing facilities did you people have?
Well, they have facilities where kids can come and stay in schools, actually just bunks on the floor kind of thing, very primitive. But we didn't do that. Our first time going, we had all decided to go to hotels just because we weren't real sure how it all worked.
Right.
If we were to do it again, which I'm not sure that we will, we would probably stay in the schools just for the experience of being in the same room with other teams and eating together. But we had teams at our hotel in both places, in Amsterdam and in Sweden. So great experience, wonderful accommodations. Very, very nice accommodations.
The thing I always remember about hotels in Europe from times we've been over there is that they are very smaller and comfortable. I love their pillows there. That's when I first got used to good, nice, soft pillows, down pillows.
Yeah.
I'm sure you had those in
I don't
Sweden.
recall that standing out to me, but the food was
And the
great.
food
we
was
had
terrific, yeah.
We had a buffet in Amsterdam several times, and breakfast in Sweden every day, and great breakfast, wonderful food, very hospitable, very helpful, not being able to read most of the street signs and understand. We had great help with the hotels, and it was great. Yeah.
Did you find out that there's a lot of people in Europe that could speak English?
Oh, yes.
I mean, with a heavy accent. That was one thing always seemed amazing to me, is how we couldn't speak their language, but they could speak ours so well. You say, "Do you speak English?" Just a little. That was something I could remember. But they're nice people. When you're over there with young men and women, the age of your son, Benjamin, it really makes it special because you automatically have a lot in common with the other adults that you meet while you're over there, don't you?
Oh, yes, yes. We had a great experience, too, of going to the Anne Frank house while we were in Gothenburg. That was very powerful because
I didn't realize that's where she lived, was Gothenburg.
So we got to go in the area, the actual facility where she, it was in Amsterdam, I said Sweden.
Yeah.
We got to go into the home where they were in hiding above the workplace, and we got to walk all through it, and it was very powerful, not only to the parents, but to the kids, because she was a 14-year-old girl, so these 14-year-old boys,
right.
Really could understand, what it would be like, at least a small way of being 14 and thinking of what she went through. So that was powerful. There were lots of things about the trip. It was much more than soccer.
Oh, it was, and that's good that it was, because it would be a waste if you just went there and it was just soccer, because that's an opportunity, especially with your son, that he may not get to do for a very long time. And to do it with you had to be special. And what happened in that whole experience for you that if someone were to say, now, Abby, the one thing you'll always remember about that experience, and maybe I'm putting you on the spot, and I'm dragging it out so you can think about it.
No,
what would you put
there's a
there?
lot. I mean, it really could have been multiple things, but probably...
You can say multiple if you'd like.
No, probably the single thing that I could narrow it down to would be the actual opening ceremony at the Gothia Cup.
With all those young athletes.
Yes, it was amazing. And they announced each country, and they carried a flag in and had a team that represented that country follow them in. And that was just amazing, you know, especially, I mean, for me, I have not traveled abroad before, but also my 14-year-old son, having not been very many different places, to be able to see these young people from all over the world and to see how big the world is and just gain that understanding, that worldview that's different than what he's ever experienced. So that's pretty powerful. And then even leaving there, you know, the teams walking out and the unity. You know, you think about where, you know, the wars and all the different things going on in the world, but yet we had teams from Iraq there and, you know, just very peaceful. And to see young people getting along from all over the world and even going down through the main part of town past restaurants, we would have people that would recognize we were from the United States, from other countries, and they would start shouting, USA, USA, cheering for it. You know, they were happy to see us, and it was just such a positive experience, you know, none of the stuff you see on the news. You know, these kids were just having fun playing soccer and enjoying being a teenager. So
it's really, really rewarding to come away with that memory.
Yeah.
May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. The New Testament scholar Francis Folk says that while it is common for Christians to pray upon bended knee, it was not so common for first century Jews like St. Paul. It seems that at the time of Jesus and the apostles, the first century Jews would typically pray standing up, arms outstretched. They didn't bend their knee and kneel to pray like we do, unless it was a matter of urgency, a matter of seriousness. Folk says that when people would bend the knee to pray, it expressed to everyone deep emotion that they felt, the urgency that they felt in their prayers, their earnestness. When someone knelt to pray, it was a clear indication that they were begging God, they were pleading with God, entreating with all their vigor, the earnestness of God. If someone knelt to pray, it was a big deal, a very big deal. And yet that's exactly what St. Paul says he does in the Ephesian letter. Did you hear it this morning? Let me go back and just read this line for you. He says in the beginning of the New Testament lesson on page 6 in your bulletin, "For this reason I bow my knees before the Father." For this reason I bow my knees. He's earnest in prayer. And we've all been there, haven't we? Usually when we get that desperate, it's for ourselves. Something has happened and we need help. You know, we go to our knees and pray. I mean, maybe we opened up the mailbox and found out that we're a finalist in the Super Duper Sweepstakes. I don't know. I hear I'm a finalist in the Super Duper Sweepstakes. You're not one too, are you? You are. Oh no. Now I'm really going to pray with all earnestness. You know, oh Lord, if only I won that. Or maybe it's, if only I got this job. Or if only she would say yes to my marriage proposal, or if only he would ask me to marry him, or if only we could have a baby. No one knows the earnestness like infertile couples. No one knows that earnestness of prayer quite that. If only, Lord, you would heal me of this awful disease. You know the thing, don't you? The thing that drives you to your knees, that makes you pray, the thing that you need God to come in and do something that only God can do. You know, that kind of God-shaped prayer where you have to get down on your knees and it's, I'm on my knees begging kind of, God, you have to act kind of prayer. But there are other times when we actually want something for someone else. In fact, we want something for someone else even more than maybe they want it for themselves. We want something for somebody more than they want it. Maybe you remember a friend, maybe back in high school, or maybe just last week. Whatever your world is, maybe you remember a friend who made these bad choices, one after another, and you prayed for that friend, and you were earnest about that. You even tried to convince them, and you needed God to step in and do something. Or maybe you've been in a place where you're responsible for somebody, and your responsibility for them makes you care about them more than they care about themselves. I remember I was a university professor, and so I had all these students, and I taught this course, OT 201, the Pentateuch. Okay? Every student, I don't care, it was the best thing about being in a Christian college, every student had to go through this course. I don't care if you were studying to be a school teacher, or if you were studying to be a business, accountant, whatever, you had to come through me, which was kind of fun, we're all funneled in this direction. And so a study of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and oh, good, you've studied your Bible. Okay, and so I had all these students who had to come through there, and this was a serious academic pursuit, okay? I wanted them to know that the Bible wasn't just a bunch of fairy tale, pie in the sky, but this is real stuff, real life, real issues, going back thousands of years. And so it was really a challenging course. I wrote the final, and I only got a 78 when I took it. My students didn't really get that joke. I'm glad you did, yeah. It was tough, it was challenging, but I knew it had to be to get them to studying, to work hard at it, not to blow it off. I wanted them to know that the stuff that I was teaching them was the important stuff of life, that I wanted it for them often more than they wanted it for themselves. Or maybe you're already ahead of me. Maybe you've been a parent. And you know that parents, they want for their kids something better than they had. I mean, you don't even have to be a particularly good parent to want that your children's lives are better than yours, right? I mean, this is what being a parent means. I haven't experienced it yet, I hear that it carries on to the next generation. That even you want for your grandchildren more than you wanted for your children. That there's a sense of love and wanting for someone else. Any parent who's seen their kid struggle, seen their kid, make bad decisions or be just the victim of unfortunate circumstances or whatever the case may be, you know that earnestness, that I'm going to get on my knees and pray to God for this child kind of earnestness, right? Anyone who's ever been a true friend to someone, anyone who's ever been a teacher, a decent employer, a parent, a grandparent, knows that there are times when you pray for someone else even with more earnestness than you pray for yourself. And that's the case in the Ephesian letter. This is what St. Paul is saying. He is writing to these Ephesian Christians and saying that he is praying for them with an earnestness even greater than that which he would pray for himself. He's praying on their behalf. There are ancient copies of this letter that are exactly the same. Back in, perhaps you know this, back in the ancient world, there were no copiers, People sat down and with their hand, they left-handed like me, they wrote them out, they copied word for word. There are several copies of the Ephesian letter, ancient copies. And most of them say to the church at Ephesus. But there are some that say Paul, an apostle to the church at Laodicea. It's interesting. The rest of the entire letter is exactly the same, but there's this one little difference. to the church at Ephesus or the church of Laodicea. You see, this was Paul's only universal letter, the only letter he actually writes to the whole church. I mean, the other ones are the church at Rome or the church at Corinth or the church at Philippi. He writes to a person, Philemon. I want to talk to this fellow particularly, and to Timothy particularly. But this is a letter that Paul writes to the entire church. I think if we were digging enough in sand, we could find maybe a letter to Pergamum or Thessalonica or wherever. There are these other copies probably of this same letter that exist. This is Paul's message to the church. And his main gist is this: becoming a Christian is a really big deal, and it changes everything. It comes with responsibility. Imagine, just for a moment, that I went into my office and handed you the keys to my motorcycle. I don't think I'm going to do it, but just imagine that I did, and I gave them to you, and I said, go have a good time, It would come with responsibility. I would expect that you don't wreck my motorcycle, right? I would expect that you, for your sake, that you don't wreck that motorcycle. But I would expect that it comes back kind of in one piece. That you talk to her nicely. Her name is Ruby. It really is. And that you're kind to that motorcycle, that you treat it. St. Paul is saying, becoming a Christian is a great thing. It's a gift. And it does come with responsibility. But halfway through the letter, he gets kind of sidetracked, and he says, you know what, I just want to pray for you. I want to pray for you, and I want you to understand just how much, just how invigorated my prayer. But when he starts to do this, he gets a little sidetracked. His adjectives get many, the superlatives get thrown out there, and we sort of lose track of it. And so it's a little bit unfortunate, but it's good, because you need me. It gives me job security. So just for the sake of job security, will you take your bulletin and look with me at Ephesians chapter 3? In the very beginning of this letter, Paul says, or in the beginning of this section, for this reason I bow my knees to the Father, from whom every family in heaven and earth is named, that according to the riches of his glory, look at this. Here's what he's praying for. That he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being. What are you praying for? I'm praying that the church individually would be strengthened in a way that all of you, Ephesian Christians, Laodicean Christians, Thessalonican Christians, Hudson Christians, would be strengthened inwardly. Now, you know what it means to be outwardly strong, right? People with big muscles who can lift heavy things. If there's something big and heavy, you find the strong person and ask that strong, will you come move this heavy thing? Often I am called upon for just such, not really. I mean, I thought that was really good. Okay. Often you look for the person who's strong. That can. What does it mean, though, to be inwardly strong? What does it mean to be? Paul says to be strengthened in faith. That you would be rooted and grounded in love, to be strengthened in faith, strengthened in the conviction that God is, that God exists, that God is one who hears and answers prayer. Now let me say this, faith is not certainty. Faith is not certainty, not in the intellectual, epistemological sense of certainty. It's not certainty like you're certain that you're here right now, or you're certain that I'm what? Although this could all be a dream. A good dream, perhaps. But, the sort of certainty that you have about the ground underneath your feet when you're walking. It's not that kind of certainty. It's sort of the certainty that you would have if you were on a rickety bridge and you took a step and you believed it was going to hold you, and you took another and took another and took another. Faith is a lot like love. You know it when you have it. But it's difficult to explain, it's difficult to measure, it's difficult to quantify, but it's real. So here's the question. Why does Paul pray that we would have such certainty? Why does he pray we would have inner strength? Verse 18, look down there with me again, right? He prays for this so that you may have strength to comprehend. He wants us to be able to comprehend. Notice this, with all the saints, what is the breadth and length and height and depth, measurements, and to know the love of Christ. Look at this. To know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge. How can you know that which is unknowable? I want you to be able to grasp that which is ungraspable. Is that a word, ungraspable? To comprehend that which is incomprehensible. I want you to experience inwardly the love of God, so that, verse 19, you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Paul's most desperate prayer for the church. St. Paul's most desperate prayer for the church. This missionary of the church, this first apostle who goes to the Gentiles, his first and most desperate prayer is that we would not just be regular old Joes and Jims and Sallys and Barbers and whoever, but that we would be filled with the fullness of God, that we would be individuals who embody the life of God in the world. So we'd be like that 4-year-old who's carrying a bowl of soup or carrying a cup of water. You never give a cup of water to a 4-year-old unless they're in the kitchen, right? Because what do? They have one speed. It's like, supersonic speed. And you give them a glass of water and they run, and it sloshes That's what Paul wants for us. He wants, not that we slosh water everywhere, but that we would be so filled with the fullness of God that when we go into the world, when we go into our places of responsibility, it would just spill out here and there and everywhere on people all around us. There's a story that's told about this 19th century violinist, Niccolo Paganini. And Paganini was famous in his day, a fantastic violinist in Italy. And one day he's given this great concert, said to be his greatest concert ever. And the auditorium is packed. He's a full orchestra. And he's up there playing. His tone is perfect. He's right on, pitch perfect. It was the greatest night ever. But as he's playing, suddenly a string breaks on his Stradivarius. And he stops and he looks at it and he kind of, shrugs his shoulders, shakes his head, and continues playing the same number, but now with only 3 strings. The crowd went crazy. There was a roar of the people they were amazed. Here's this great violinist playing this incredibly difficult number with only 3 strings. And then another string broke. And he gasped and began to play. And another string broke, and he stopped. And he looked at here he's holding this violin up in the air, 3 strings hanging down loosely, only 1 attached. But he didn't walk off stage. He stood his ground. He put the violin back up there, and Paganini started playing again, the same piece, but with only 1 string. You know what? In life, only one thing really matters. Only one thing really matters. To be filled with the love of God. Because that will change everything. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Okay, Joe, great homily. Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's going to be it. Time to close up. Folks, thanks for being with us. Thanks for coming. We'll see you in church. Bye now.